The sound of the rain hitting the window seemed to sync with her racing heart. That morning, everything she believed to be certain started to crumble in a cruel and unexpected way. The messages she found on his phone left no room for doubt. Every word, every emoji, every little detail felt like a knife cutting through her chest. The man she loved, the man whose child she was carrying, was cheating on her. She took a deep breath, trying to control the tears, but they just kept falling. There was no way to pretend everything was fine anymore. No way to accept the lame excuses, the unexplained absences, the sudden mood swings. Now she had proof, and the pain came mixed with a growing anger inside her, like a storm ready to explode. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Her face was swollen from crying, her eyes red, her expression carrying the weight of a world full of disappointment. But something changed at that moment. Between sobs, she felt a strength rising inside her that she never knew she had. That woman who used to be submissive, who always forgave, who always stayed silent, didn't exist anymore. With trembling hands, she grabbed the phone again and started reading every conversation, every planned meeting, every cheap compliment, every fake promise of love made to someone else. Her blood boiled. The baby inside her deserved a strong mother, not a broken woman. That's when suddenly an idea struck her, an idea that later on would change both their lives forever. Flashes of how it all began came back painfully. The start of their relationship, the wedding plans, the discovery of her pregnancy. Everything seemed so perfect. She gave herself completely to that relationship. Gave up friends, dreams, opportunities, just to be by his side. And now, here she was, alone, betrayed, and pregnant. She paced back and forth in the living room, breathing heavily. More than once, she thought about calling him right then, and there, screaming, cursing, throwing all the dirt she had found in his face. But no. Something inside her told her to wait, to act smart, to do something he would never forget. Her mind started working fast. She remembered every detail she could use against him, remembered the mutual friends, the secrets he had told her, the lies he had accidentally let slip. The pain was there, throbbing, but her thirst for justice was even stronger. She grabbed a sheet of paper and started writing down a plan. A detailed, meticulous, calculated plan. It wouldn't just be a scandal. It wouldn't just be a scene. It would be something that would mark his life forever. Something that would make him regret every text, every touch, every betrayal. As she wrote, her belly moved. The baby seemed to feel everything the mother was going through. And in that instant, she made a silent promise. This child would be born into a world where his mother would never be stepped on again. The afternoon dragged on slowly, as if time itself was stretching each second just to test her patience. But she stayed strong. She organized the evidence, separated his clothes, and prepared the setting for a moment he would definitely never forget. Every time she looked at the clock, her heart beat faster. It was almost time for him to get home from work, and she had memorized every word of the speech she was about to give. But before that, there was still one last detail to handle, something that would make everything even more impactful. She went to the bedroom, opened the drawer, and pulled out an object he would never imagine she still kept. It was a gift he had given her at the start of their relationship, with a cheesy dedication that back then she thought was beautiful, but now would become the final piece of the humiliation puzzle he deserved. With everything ready, she sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling, eyes fixed on the living room door. The minutes felt like hours. The anxiety mixed with the anger made the air heavy. She knew that after that night, nothing would ever be the same again. Not for her. Not for him. The sound of the key turning in the lock was the sign that the moment had arrived. She took one last deep breath, wiped the tears from her face, and prepared for what was about to happen next. The first step of her plan was already underway. and what was coming next. You won't believe. But before continuing this story, tell me in the comments from which city are you watching us, and stay with me until the end, because what she's about to do next will leave you speechless. She remained seated for a few minutes, taking deep breaths, trying to control the avalanche of feelings that overwhelmed her. No matter how much she had planned every detail, the nervousness was inevitable. The sound of the key turning in the lock seemed to echo throughout the house, like an announcement that the moment had arrived. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it throbbing at her temples. As soon as he walked in, with the same tired look he always had, she realized he had no idea what was about to happen. He tossed the keys on the table, took off his jacket, and walked to the kitchen, asking about dinner, as if everything was normal. She watched him from a distance, with a mixture of anger and sadness. That would be the last time he lived under the illusion that she was still the same woman as before. Without rushing, she stood up, grabbed her phone, and compiled all the messages she had found into a single file. She also saved some suspicious photos he had received. She knew she needed every detail, every piece of evidence, to make that confrontation even more impactful. When he returned to the living room, her expression was no longer one of pain, but of determination. He asked if everything was all right, with that tone of false concern she knew all too well. Instead of answering, she simply handed him the phone, already open, with the conversations displayed. The silence that followed was more deafening than any scream. He froze for a few seconds, staring at the screen, trying to understand what was happening. His hands began to tremble. He tried to stammer an excuse, invent an explanation, but she interrupted him before he could finish the first sentence. She said she didn't want to hear any lies, that from that moment on, everything he had to say had to be the raw and absolute truth, because she was tired of being made a fool. He tried to approach her, as he always did when trying to smooth over a difficult situation, but this time she stepped back. She said this would be his last night in that house, that she had already taken all the necessary steps to ensure that from then on, he would no longer have the right to come and go as he pleased. The shock on his face was obvious. She went to the closet, grabbed a suitcase that was already packed, and placed it in front of him. Inside were all his clothes, mixed with a few keepsakes she made sure to return. He looked at the suitcase, then at her, and seemed to realize for the first time that she wasn't bluffing. This was real. The tension grew with every second. He started raising his voice, trying to turn the situation around, blaming her for not trusting him, for invading his phone, for not giving him space. But she stayed calm. She said that for years she had trusted him blindly, that she had ignored obvious signs, believed in empty promises, and closed her eyes not to see what had been right in front of her. With a firm tone, she explained that this decision wasn't just for her. It was for the child she was carrying. She said she wouldn't accept raising a child beside someone capable of cheating, lying, and manipulating, that she would rather face everything alone than live that farce for another day. Her words were like precise blows. He tried to argue, asked for a second chance, promised to change, swore it had all been a mistake. But she stood her ground. She recalled every night spent alone, every hidden cry, every ridiculous excuse she had swallowed. She said that from that moment on, she was writing a new chapter of her life, a chapter where he would no longer have a place. While he struggled to grasp the gravity of the situation, she opened the living room door and asked him to leave. She said he had exactly 1 hour to take his things and go, that after that, she would call the police if necessary. The look of disbelief on his face confirmed that he never imagined she would have the courage to take that step. She went back to the couch, taking deep breaths, her hands still shaking, but her heart a little lighter. For the first time in a long while, she felt she was regaining control over her own life, that she was no longer a prisoner of his lies, that even though she was scared of the future, she was doing the right thing. While he dragged the suitcase in silence to the door, she remained seated, watching. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't ask him to stay. She simply watched. That chapter close, certain that the next one would be written in a completely different way. When he finally left, she locked the door, leaned her back against it, and slid down to the floor. The tears came, but this time they were of relief, a relief mixed with pain, exhaustion, and a hint of hope. She knew the road ahead would be hard, but she also knew she was no longer willing to accept less than she deserved. That night, she slept, hugging her belly, making new promises to the child not yet born. She promised to be strong, that she would never again allow anyone to treat her that way, that from now on she would choose her own happiness, without fear, without doubts, without looking back, and what she would do the next day was something neither he nor anyone else around them would ever imagine. The dawn arrived accompanied by a strange silence, as if the whole house knew that something definitive had happened the night before. She woke up early, her eyes still swollen, but with a new determination. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she ran her hands over her belly and felt a slight movement. That was enough to bring back all the promises she had made just a few hours earlier. Without hesitation, she grabbed the phone and started making calls. She called a close friend who already knew part of the story and had offered to help. She also contacted a lawyer, someone recommended by a friend who had gone through a similar situation. Every call felt like one more step away from that toxic relationship. Throughout the morning, she organized all the documents she would need. She separated receipts, saved the screenshots of the conversations, and prepared everything for whatever came next. She didn't want any more surprises. She knew that at some point he would try to come back, and when that happened, she wanted to be ready to stop him. Shortly after lunch, as she had already anticipated, her phone started ringing insistently. He called, sent messages, left long voice notes, trying to convince her, appealing to old memories, using that victim tone he always adopted when he felt he was losing control. But she didn't answer any of his attempts. Instead, she went to a store and bought a new lock. When the installer arrived, she watched every movement, as if that symbolized the change she was implementing in her own life. Every tightened screw felt like a turned page, a closed cycle. When the new key was handed over, she held it tightly, as if it were a trophy. By late afternoon, as the sun began to set, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea in her hands. She looked at the horizon, took a deep breath, and for the first time, in a long time, felt a bit of peace. But that tranquility didn't last. A notification on her phone caught her attention, a message from an unknown woman. With trembling hands, she opened the message and read every word carefully. The woman said she knew the story well, claimed to have gone through the same situation, and that she too had been deceived by him for months. She detailed meetings, conversations, and even mentioned dates that matched the times when he had said he was in meetings or working late. The shock was inevitable. Even with enough proof of the betrayal, knowing there was someone else, that she wasn't the only one being deceived, brought a new kind of anger. But along with the rage came an idea. Maybe it was time to expose everything, not just to confront him, but to prevent other people from going through the same. With courage, she replied to the woman. They arranged a meeting at a nearby cafe, in a discreet place. The two talked for hours, exchanging stories, venting, and confirming details. It was like putting together a puzzle that in the end showed an even uglier picture than she had imagined. Right there, in that meeting, an unexpected alliance was born. In the following days, she dedicated herself to taking care of herself. She attended a prenatal appointment, started preparing the baby's room, and tried, little by little, to rebuild the pieces that the relationship had destroyed. But no matter how much she tried to move on, the story wasn't over. She knew that. The following week, while returning from a medical appointment, she spotted his car parked on the corner of the street. Her heart raced. He was there, standing still, as if watching her from afar. She took a deep breath, ignored his presence and walked home, but it didn't take long before the doorbell rang. She opened the window and saw him outside, eyes red and voice trembling. He begged to talk, said he had made a terrible mistake, that he was sorry and would do anything to regain her trust. But she held her ground. Calmly, she said there was no more conversation possible. He insisted, said he just wanted 5 minutes. She replied that 5 minutes wouldn't be enough to fix years of lies. She closed the window, locked all the doors, and tried to ignore the shouting coming from the street. He stayed there for a while, screaming, crying, banging on the door, until he finally gave up and left. That night, she realized there was still an open wound inside her. A part of her wanted to understand why all this had happened. She wanted to know when it had started, what had been true, and what had been a lie. But at the same time, she knew she might never get all the answers. That's when she made an unexpected decision. She grabbed a new notebook, opened it to the first page, and began to write. She wrote everything she felt, every moment of pain, every detail of that story. She told herself that by finishing that account, she would finally close that chapter. For hours, she wrote without stopping. The tears fell, but she didn't let the pen stop. She remembered everything, the first signs of suspicion, the sleepless nights, the poorly told excuses, the diverted glances, the unjustified absences. Every line was a release. When she finished, she took a deep breath, closed the notebook, and stored it at the back of the drawer. She stood up, walked to the mirror, and looked at herself with a different gaze. For the first time in a long while, she saw a strong woman, capable of facing any storm. The phone rang again, but this time she hung up without even looking at who it was. She didn't want to hear any more excuses. She didn't want to hear any more promises. She knew that what lay ahead would be hard, but she was also sure it would be a new beginning. The next step would be even more unexpected. A plan she was already starting to craft in silence, one that would forever change the course of that story. The next morning, she woke up with a different feeling. There was something inside her beating strongly, as if a new chapter was about to begin. After breakfast, she grabbed her phone and started searching for support groups for women who had gone through situations like hers. She found a group in a nearby city that met once a week to share stories and give emotional support to one another. Without much thought, she signed up for the next meeting. She wanted to hear other voices, to understand she was not alone in that pain. In the days leading up to the meeting, she started organizing her life even more. She separated clothes she no longer wanted, cleaned out closets, threw away objects that brought bad memories. It was as if every act of tidying up was also a step toward cleansing her soul. On the afternoon of the meeting, she chose simple but comfortable clothes. She put on light lipstick, fixed her hair, and left home with a racing heart. Upon arriving, she was welcomed with warm smiles. Women of different ages were there, each with their story, each with their scar. When it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath and began to tell. The words flowed like a river bursting after months of being held back. There were tears, hugs, and mostly identification. For the first time, she realized her pain was not unique. Others had walked similar roads and were there, standing strong, moving forward. After that day, she decided she no longer wanted to live looking back. She needed a bigger purpose. That's when the idea of creating a blog came up. A space where she could tell her story anonymously and at the same time help other women going through similar situations. With the help of a friend who understood technology, she created the page. In the first posts, she shared details of how she discovered the betrayal, how she faced the first days of pain, and how she was finding strength to start over. The views started timidly, but within weeks, thousands of people began to follow. Messages of support came from all over the country. Some women shared even more painful stories. Others said they were gaining courage thanks to her texts. That brought a sense of mission accomplished, even knowing there was still much to rebuild inside herself. As the blog grew, she began planning the future more clearly. She had new exams, chose the maternity hospital where she would have the baby, and began thinking about possible names for the child. There were still nights of crying, moments of weakness, but now they were less frequent. Strength was growing inside her. One day, opening the blog inbox, she found a message that made her heart stop for a few seconds. It was from an unknown address, but the content was clear. He had discovered the blog. In the text, he said he knew those stories were about him, that he felt humiliated and exposed. He asked her to stop, threatening legal action if she continued. Fear hit hard. For a few moments she felt sweaty palms and her whole body trembling. But instead of despairing, she grabbed the phone and called the lawyer who had been supporting her from the beginning. She told him what happened, showed the envelope, and with his help, they drew up a new strategy. For weeks, the two worked together. On the defense, they gathered evidence, screenshots, testimonies, everything that could prove the truth. The hearing was scheduled for 2 months later, and while waiting, she continued with the blog, support group meetings, and preparing for the baby's arrival. Amid all this, a new surprise crossed her path. A journalist following the blog reached out, interested in doing a story about women who turned their pain into a voice. He wanted to hear her story. After much thought, she agreed on the condition her name stayed anonymous. The story aired and had huge repercussions. Messages of support tripled. Women from other states started following her, wanting to know more, seeking strength and inspiration. She, who once felt so small and fragile, was now seen as an example of overcoming, but the tension with the lawsuit still hung like a grey cloud. The day of the hearing was near. Every night she dreamed about that moment, imagining what it would be like to face him face to face after so much time. She knew that meeting would be decisive to finally close that chapter. Deep in her heart, she wished that trial would be more than a legal reckoning. She truly wanted to end that story with an outcome even she couldn't yet predict. The day of the hearing arrived with a cloudy sky, as if the weather itself understood the weight of that moment. She dressed carefully, wearing clothes that conveyed both strength and serenity. On the way to the courthouse, her heart raced, not with fear, but with determination. She knew this wasn't just a trial, but a chance to turn the page for good. Upon entering the courtroom, their eyes met for the first time since it all began. There was no longer love, nor open resentment, just a silent and heavy distance. The hearing started, and every word spoken seemed to echo in her mind, reinforcing everything she had gone through, everything she had suffered, and everything she had overcome. Her lawyer was firm, presenting undeniable evidence and testimonies that laid bare the raw truth. She felt a wave of relief with each argument, as though long-awaited justice was finally arriving. On the other side, he tried to deny, to justify himself, but his words held no more power. Throughout the process, she kept her posture calm and confident, reminding herself of the women who followed her blog, who found inspiration in her, who needed this victory to move forward. This fight wasn't just hers, it was for all of them. When the judge stepped out to deliver the verdict, silence filled the room. She closed her eyes for a moment, seeking peace deep within, surrendering everything to fate. Minutes later, the sentence was announced. Justice was on her side. That victory wasn't just legal, but symbolic. It was the acknowledgement of her pain, her courage, and the strength that had been born inside her when she decided not to remain silent. Tears ran down her face, not of sadness, but of relief and freedom. Leaving the courthouse, the sun began to peek timidly through the clouds like a sign of new beginnings. She felt the invisible embrace of all the women who had walked similar paths and now stood with her. She knew this battle was only the start of a new journey. At home, she lovingly prepared the baby's room. Every detail was chosen with care, like a promise of better days. Even with all the scars from the past, hope filled the future that now unfolded before her. Messages on the blog kept coming, stronger and more emotional each time. She knew her testimony was a light in the darkness for many lives, and that gave her a sense of purpose that went far beyond herself. As the weeks passed, the baby was born. It was a moment of pure emotion, of rebirth. She looked at that tiny life and felt for the first time a deep and true peace. Every bit of suffering had been worth it to arrive here. On the day of the birth, she received an unexpected letter. It was from him. This time, no accusations, no threats. Just a sincere apology and acknowledgement of his mistakes. She read it, took a deep breath, and kept that letter as a symbol of the past left behind. The forgiveness didn't come for him, but for herself. So she could move forward light, without resentment, only with gratitude for what she had learned and for what she had conquered. The weight of betrayal was replaced by the lightness of overcoming. She understood that true strength isn't in forgetting, but in transforming pain into learning and helping others do the same. Her story had become a beacon for those navigating turbulent seas, and so, between hard days and moments of joy, she rebuilt her life, step by step, without hurry, with courage and faith. She knew the future was hers to write. Deep in her heart, she felt stronger than ever, ready to face whatever came next, because she had already overcome the worst. Her voice was now free, and she knew she could continue inspiring others. With every word shared, with every message received, she reaffirmed her commitment never to let pain silence her again. Her story was meant to be told, to be heard, to be remembered, and in the stillness of the night, reflecting on everything, one certainty arose. Self-love is the greatest gift anyone can give themselves. And that gift she had earned through sweat, tears, and courage. The past had left marks, but it did not define who she was. She was much more than the pain, much more than the betrayal. She was a reborn woman. And so this story ends, not with an ending, but with a beginning. An invitation for everyone listening to never give up, to find strength in adversity, and to believe that even in the darkest moments, there is light. If you're going through a hard time, remember, you are not alone. Your story matters. Your voice can change the world. If you like this story, like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories. Leave your opinion in the comments or share a story you want to tell. Until the next story, stay strong and take good care of yourself.